34, my Amish wife found the other woman's bonnet in our wagon. Rebecca stopped speaking to me on a Tuesday in October, not with anger, that I could have handled. She simply closed her mouth the way you close a gate you never intend to open again. She set my supper plate on the table, folded the cloth napkin beside it, and walked upstairs without looking at me. On the plate was a white prayer bonnet that did not belong to her. She had found it tucked beneath the seat board of our wagon, pressed into the corner where the wood meets the frame, in a place you would only discover if you were reaching for something that had fallen. I sat at that table for nearly an hour. The food went cold. The bonnet stayed exactly where she placed it. And I understood, looking at it under the lamplight, that the life I had been holding together with silence and careful arrangements had just come apart in the one place I never thought to check. My name is Joseph. I was 23 when I married Rebecca Lapp, and I was raised in a settlement in Lancaster County where families had been intermarried so long that nearly everyone shared a handful of last names. Rebecca's family and mine had been close for 2 generations. Our fathers farmed adjacent parcels. Our mothers had been in the same church group since girlhood. When our bishop, Eli Stoltzfus, suggested to both families that a match between Rebecca and me would be fitting, nobody was surprised. I was not opposed. Rebecca was intelligent, capable, and had a stillness about her that I found steadying. She did not chatter, she observed. I mistook her quietness for contentment. That was my first error, and I would not understand it for years. We married in November, 2 weeks after my 23rd birthday. The first year was ordinary in the way new Amish marriages tend to be, learning each other's rhythms, adjusting to shared space, building a household routine. Rebecca kept the home with precision. I worked the farm and took on side work, building storage sheds with my older brother Amos. We attended church every other Sunday. We visited her parents on alternating weeks and mine on the others. From the outside, and even from the inside for a while, everything looked exactly as it was supposed to. The trouble began, though I did not recognize it as trouble, in our second spring when a young widow named Leah Byler moved into a small house on the edge of our district. She had come from a community in Ohio after her husband died in a farming accident. She had no children and no family nearby. Our bishop asked several families to help her settle in, and because Amos and I were already doing carpentry work, we were assigned to repair her porch and front steps. It was simple work, 2 days at most, but Leah talked while we worked, and she talked in a way I was not accustomed to. She asked questions, not small questions, real ones. She asked what I thought about the new fence ordinance. She asked whether I had read anything beyond the Bible. She asked if I had ever seen the ocean. Nobody in my life had ever asked me questions like that, and certainly not a woman. I want to be careful here, because what happened between Leah and me is not what most people would assume. I did not fall into some passionate, reckless affair. What I fell into was slower and, in some ways, more dangerous. I fell into conversation. I began finding reasons to stop by her property. A loose board, a sagging gutter, a question about the chimney draft. Each visit lasted longer than it needed to. Each one gave me something I had not realized I was missing. Leah listened to me as though my thoughts had weight. Rebecca, by then, had become even quieter than before. She answered direct questions but offered nothing on her own. I told myself the silence between us was normal, that Amish marriages were built on duty, not on talk, that I was fulfilling my responsibilities, that stopping by a widow's house to help with repairs was charity, not betrayal. But I knew, somewhere beneath the rationalizing, I knew that I was dividing myself into 2 people, the husband who sat across from Rebecca at supper, and the man who lingered on Leah's porch, feeling seen for the first time in his adult life. It was Amos who noticed first. He came by the shop one afternoon while I was planing boards and asked, very casually, how often I was visiting Leah's place. I told him I had been checking on some trim work. He nodded slowly and said, "People talk, Joseph. Even when there is nothing to talk about, they will find something." I thanked him for the warning and told myself I would reduce the visits. I did not. What I did not know, and this is the part that still cost me to say aloud, was that Amos had already gone to Rebecca. Not to accuse me, not even to inform on me directly. He told her, in what he later described as brotherly concern, that I had been spending time helping the widow Byler, and that it might be wise for Rebecca to accompany me on the next visit so that the appearance of propriety would be maintained. He framed it as protection for our family's reputation. Rebecca thanked him. She said nothing to me. But something shifted in her after that conversation. She began watching me more carefully, not with suspicion exactly, but with a kind of patient, measuring attention, the way you watch a crack in a wall to see whether it is growing. I wish I could say I stopped. Instead, I convinced myself that if I was more discreet, the problem would solve itself. One afternoon in early September, I drove the wagon to Leah's place to deliver a window frame I had built. She came out to help me carry it, and as we worked, a sudden rain came down hard. We moved onto the covered porch and sat there while the storm passed. She had removed her bonnet to wring the rain from it and set it on the wagon seat beside her. When the rain stopped, I loaded the frame and drove home. I did not notice the bonnet. Leah did not mention it. It slipped beneath the seat board, the way small things do when a wagon jolts over uneven ground, and it stayed there, invisible, for almost 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, I believed I had begun to correct my course. I visited Leah less frequently. I made more effort at home. I asked Rebecca about her garden, about her sewing, about her mother's health. She answered politely, but without warmth. I interpreted this as progress, as normalcy returning. I did not understand that Rebecca had already been gathering her own information, quietly, without confrontation, in the manner she approached everything. She had spoken to Amos again. She had spoken to her mother. She had spoken, I later learned, to the bishop's wife, Sarah Stoltzfus, who was perhaps the most quietly influential person in our district. Sarah had confirmed that Leah Byler had been seen on my wagon more than once, and that I had been observed at her property at hours that extended well beyond any reasonable repair work. Sarah did not use the word affair. She used the phrase unequal attention, which in our community carried almost as much weight. Rebecca absorbed all of this and said nothing to me. She did not cry. She did not accuse. She waited. The day she found the bonnet, she had been reaching beneath the wagon seat for a pair of garden shears she had left there the previous week. Her hand touched fabric instead of metal, and she pulled out a white prayer covering that was clearly not her own. Rebecca's bonnets were sewn by her mother, with a distinctive narrow pleat along the back edge. This one had a wider pleat and a slightly different shape, the style common to communities in Ohio. She would have known instantly that it did not belong to anyone in our district. She placed it on my supper plate and went upstairs, and I sat there understanding that every careful arrangement I had made had failed. What followed was not a single confrontation, but a series of conversations that unfolded over the next 2 weeks, each one stripping away another layer of the story I had told myself. The first was with Rebecca, the morning after she found the bonnet. She came downstairs, poured coffee for both of us, sat across from me, and said, "I need you to tell me what is true and what I have been told, because they are not the same, and I am tired of comparing them." I told her about the visits. I told her about the conversations. I told her that nothing physical had happened between Leah and me, which was the truth. I expected relief on her face. Instead, she looked at me with an expression I will never forget, a kind of exhausted clarity, and said, "You think that is the part that matters." She explained, in that same measured voice, that Amos had come to her months ago, that she had spoken with Sarah Stoltzfus, that her own mother had advised her to say nothing, and to wait for me to either stop on my own or to be caught. Her mother's counsel had been to protect the marriage quietly, to avoid scandal, to let the situation resolve without public knowledge. Rebecca had followed that advice, and she told me it was the loneliest season of her life. Not because she feared I was sleeping with another woman, but because every person she turned to for help told her to be silent. Her mother, Amos, Sarah. Even the structure of our community, which had no mechanism for a wife to say, "My husband is giving his heart to someone else," without triggering a formal process that would shame them both. "I was not angry at you alone," she said. "I was angry at everyone who knew and told me to wait." That sentence broke something open in me that all the guilt had not reached. I went to see Amos that same afternoon. I expected him to be defensive, but instead he was direct. He told me he had gone to Rebecca because he believed it was the right thing, but he admitted that he had also been protecting himself. If my behavior became public, and it emerged that Amos had known and said nothing, his own standing would be damaged. His visit to Rebecca had not been purely brotherly. It had been strategic. He needed someone else to manage the problem so that he would not be seen as complicit. When I asked him why he had not simply come to me and told me to stop, he said something that has stayed with me. Because you would not have listened to me, and then I would have been the one who failed. He was probably right, but it did not make it easier to hear. The following Sunday, Bishop Stoltzfus visited our home. I do not know whether Sarah had told him or whether Rebecca had requested the visit herself. He sat in our front room, accepted a glass of water, and told me that he had heard concerns about my conduct. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten excommunication. He spoke to me about the danger of what he called divided loyalty, and said that in our community, a man's attention was a resource that belonged to his household. He told me I was to cease all unnecessary contact with Leah Byler, and that any future carpentry work at her property would be handled by someone else. Then he said something that surprised me. He said Leah had already come to him. She had visited him 3 days earlier and told him that she believed my visits had become too frequent and that she was uncomfortable with the position it placed her in. She had asked him to intervene. She had not waited for the bonnet to be discovered. She had not waited for gossip to reach her. She had gone to the bishop herself and asked for the situation to end. I had assumed all those months that Leah was a willing participant in what was happening between us, that the conversations meant to her what they meant to me. Learning that she had been the one to seek help, that she had recognized the danger before I did, and that she had acted to protect both herself and Rebecca, rearranged everything I believed about those visits. I had been telling myself a story in which two people were drawn to each other and circumstances kept them apart. The truth was simpler and more humbling. One person had been drawn, the other had been kind, and then concerned, and then afraid of what my attention might cost her in a small community where a widow's reputation was already fragile. I returned the bonnet to Leah through the bishop's wife. I did not go to her property. I did not write a note. I asked Sarah to return it with my apology, and Sarah did. Leah left our district before Christmas. I was told she moved to a community in Indiana where she had a cousin. I never spoke to her again. Rebecca and I did not recover quickly. There was no single moment of forgiveness, no tearful reconciliation. There was a long, uncomfortable winter in which we relearned how to sit in the same room. I had to accept that my wife's silence, which I had always interpreted as coldness or indifference, had been her way of surviving a situation in which every person she trusted had told her that her pain was less important than the family's appearance. She had been managing alone while I was sitting on someone else's porch, feeling sorry for myself. I also had to reckon with Amos. My brother and I continued to work together, because in a community like ours, you do not simply dissolve a partnership over a personal failure. But something had shifted permanently between us. I understood now that his loyalty operated on a calculation I had never noticed before. He loved me, I believe, but he loved his own standing slightly more. That knowledge did not make me hate him. It made me cautious, and that caution never fully went away. The person I thought about most, in the years that followed, was Rebecca's mother. She had known, she had seen her daughter suffering, and her advice had been to endure it quietly, to protect the surface of the marriage at the cost of her daughter's trust in every relationship around her. I asked Rebecca once whether she had forgiven her mother. She said, "I understand why she said what she said. She was taught the same thing by her own mother, but understanding is not the same as forgiveness, and I have stopped pretending they are. We are older now. Our children are grown. Rebecca and I built something real after that year, but it was built on the wreckage of the first version of our marriage, and we both know it. The foundation is honesty now rather than appearance, but honesty came at a price. It required both of us to admit that the community we loved, the The people we trusted and the rules we followed had all, in their own way, participated in the silence that nearly destroyed us. I still think about that bonnet sometimes. A small, rain-dampened piece of fabric that slipped beneath a wagon seat and stayed hidden for weeks, while every person around us was also hiding something. Amos hiding his self-interest behind concern. Rebecca's mother hiding her fear behind tradition. Sarah Stoltzfus hiding what she knew behind propriety. Leah hiding her discomfort behind politeness. And me hiding my loneliness behind the word charity. Rebecca found all of it that October evening when she reached beneath the seat looking for a pair of garden shears. She was always finding what other people thought they had put away.